Welcome to Create More Intimacy, a podcast for men. I'm Elisa Stoddard, and I help successful men stop chasing sex and start building real connection so they finally feel close, connected, and wanted again. There was probably a season when things were different. Not perfect, not without friction, but different. You were moving toward each other. There was something alive between you two. Some current of interest and closeness that made the ordinary stuff of life feel shared rather than just managed. And then, somewhere, that shifted. You cannot pinpoint exactly when it was. That is the part of this that makes this so disorienting. There was no single moment that you could go back to and say, this is where it happened. Life just kept moving, and at some point, you looked up and realized the two of you were no longer really moving together. You were moving alongside each other, which from a distance looks like the same thing, but you know the difference. If you are in your late 40s or 50s, this may be landing with particular weight right now, because something is changing in the landscape of your daily life. The kids are older, or they're already gone, or they're almost out the door. And what that means, whether you have named it or not, is that the structure that kept you both organized and purposeful together is dissolving. And what is left is the two of you, which should feel like a relief, like arrival, like finally some space and quiet and time for each other. Instead, for a lot of men, it feels like exposure. Welcome to episode 56. You're about to be alone with someone you don't really know anymore. The disconnection almost certainly started before it was visible. That is the part that most men miss. They remember the relationship feeling close, and then they remember it feeling distant. But they cannot identify the middle part because the middle part did not feel like anything dramatic. It just felt like life. The kids needed something. Work demanded more. There was a move or a job change or a health situation or a difficult year that required both of you to be in survival mode for a while. And survival mode is not relational, it's logistical. You divided responsibilities. You handled your quadrants and kept the family functioning. That made sense. That was necessary, and it worked. But something happens when that mode persists beyond the crisis. What begins as a temporary strategy becomes a permanent posture. You stop relating to each other as partners and started relating to each other as co-managers of the shared operation. The operational questions are always easier to answer than the personal ones. Where are the kids this weekend? What is the budget for the roof? When does her mother arrive? These questions all have answers. They require coordination, not vulnerability. The personal questions are just harder. How are you, really? What do you actually want right now? Do you feel close to me? Those questions carry risk. They require the other person to be present and honest and open. They require you to be present and honest and open. And at some point, without deciding to, you both stopped asking them. Not because you stopped caring, but because other things were always more pressing. Because the conversations that mattered kept getting deferred. And deferred long enough, they just simply stop happening at all. Here's something we're sitting with for a moment. The busyness was real. You are not imagining the demands of the last decade or two. Work was real. Parenting was real. Financial pressure was real. And you're not making excuses. You were handling things. But for many men, busy also served another function, and one they may not have been conscious of. Busy meant that they did not have to sit with the discomfort. When you are always moving, always handling something, always needed somewhere. You do not have to notice the distance in your marriage. You do not have to feel the awkwardness of an evening together that has nowhere to go. You do not have to face the fact that you and your wife have not had a real conversation, one where both of you were actually present and honest and curious about each other, in months, maybe longer. When the kids are at home, there's always something to talk about. There is always a situation to navigate, a schedule to coordinate, a phase to survive. The children provide an endless supply of shared purpose and common ground. They give a marriage something to organize itself around. And when that shared purpose thins out, something gets uncovered that was always there beneath the surface. Not the end of love, not the absence of caring, but a significant amount of distance. A widening gap that opens slowly over years of not quite turning toward each other. This is the thing the empty nest exposes. It's not a problem created by the kids leaving, a problem that was developing the whole time, quietly, underneath the noise of raising a family. Most men in this situation have a story. It's usually some version of one of these. The first story is, this is just what long marriages look like. We've been together a long time. The passion fades. You settle into something quieter. That is just how it is. The second story is, she is the one who pulled back. I have tried. I've reached out and I got nothing back. At some point, a man just stops putting himself out there to be rejected. The third story is, things are fine. We're not fighting. We get along. It's not passionate, but it's stable, and stable is enough, I guess. And the fourth story, the one underneath all of the others, the one that does not get said out loud because it's too uncomfortable. I am afraid to find out what is actually there if we stop being busy. These stories are understandable. They are not evidence of weakness or failure. They are what happens when a man has been managing a situation for so long that management becomes his only available mode. But they are also where disconnection persists. Because the first story confuses resignation with maturity. The second story puts the entire cause of the distance outside of you, which makes you helpless to change anything. The third story mistakes the absence of conflict for the presence of connection. And the fourth story keeps you from looking directly at something that actually needs your attention. None of these stories is entirely wrong. Parts of each of them contain real observations, but they are incomplete in ways that keep you stuck. The question is not which story is accurate. The question is, which story do you want to keep living inside of? This section requires something from you. It's not agreement and it's not self-blame. Just a willingness to hold her perspective alongside yours without immediately defending against it. While you were managing and providing and staying busy, something was happening for her too. She was feeling the distance, but she likely experienced it differently than you did. For many women, emotional disconnection does not register as a neutral background state. It registers as something is wrong. Not just situationally wrong, but relationally wrong, as in, he is not here. He does not seem interested. I am doing this all alone. She may have tried to say this to you at some point, and it may have come out in a way that sounded very much like criticism to you, because the language of emotional need often sounds like accusation to men who are already stretched thin. She said, you never talk to me, and you heard, you are failing. She said, I feel alone, and you heard, I am ungrateful for everything you do. So you defend, or you shut down, or you waited for it to pass. And she learned slowly that reaching for you in that way did not bring her closer to you. It either created conflict or was met with distance. So she stopped reaching that way. That is not the same as stopping caring. That is what happens when something repeatedly extends toward a person and finds nothing is there to meet them. By the time you are both staring at an emptier house, she may be in a place you did not see coming. Not enraged, not checked out entirely, but tired and uncertain. Uncertain about whether this is the marriage she wants to be in for the next 20 to 30 years. Uncertain about whether anything between you can actually shift. Uncertain about whether you are even aware that anything needs to shift. This isn't a verdict against you. It's just information. And it is important information because how you respond to it matters more than almost anything that came before. There is something specific happening for men in their late 40s and 50s that is worth naming plainly. This is not just a marriage problem. It is a life problem. You are at a point where the structure that organized your days, the career, the kids, the mortgage, the perpetual forward motion of building something is either complete or winding down. And the question that gets uncovered is one that many men have successfully avoided for decades. What is this life actually for? That question lands differently when your kids are leaving, when retirement is no longer abstract, when you start doing the math on the years ahead and realize they are finite in a way that used to be easy to ignore. And if you look to your marriage for something to anchor yourself in and find that the connection there has thinned to the point of near absence, the weight of that is significant. This is why so many men in midlife describe something they struggle to name. Nothing is technically wrong. They are healthy. They are provided for. They have no obvious reason to feel the way they feel. But the life they built no longer seems to contain much warmth. The person they built it with feels like a stranger. And they do not know how to say that, or who to say it to, or what it would even mean to do something about it. That unnamed feeling is not a character flaw. It is not ingratitude. It is the sensation of having arrived somewhere and realizing it's not what you were working toward. Not a failure, not the end of something, a signal that something needs to change before the distance becomes permanent. Here's what I want you to understand, and I want to be honest with you about what it requires. The arc of disconnection is long. It took years to develop. It will not reverse in a weekend, but it can reverse. What I have seen working with men in exactly this situation is that the distance is rarely as fixed as it feels. It looks like years of irreversible drift is often two people who have stopped turning toward each other for understandable reasons and have not yet tried turning back. That is a different problem than a marriage that is over. A very different problem. The men who begin to close that gap are not the ones who make grand gestures or sign up for a single weekend retreat and expect something permanent to shift. They are the ones who begin showing up differently in the daily fabric of the relationship, who start having honest conversations instead of operational ones, who learn to stay present when things get uncomfortable instead of retreating into productivity or silence. This requires something specific, not motivation, not love, which you probably still have more of than you realize. It requires skill. The particular skill of emotional engagement, which most men were never taught and have been improvising around their entire adult lives. That skill is learnable. I have seen it learned by men who were far more entrenched in disconnection than you may be. It changes the tone of a marriage. It changes what is possible in one. And it changes what the years ahead can actually feel like, which at this point in your life is no small thing. The question is not whether it is possible. The question is whether you are willing to stop waiting for it to happen on its own. If you've been listening to this and quietly recognizing yourself, I want you to sit with something before you move on. What has the distance actually cost you? Now, not in abstract terms, but in the texture of your daily life, the evenings that feel empty, the mornings that feel efficient but not warm, the sense that you are living alongside your life rather than inside it. And then ask yourself honestly, how much longer do you want to live that way? Because here's what I know about the men who do something about this. They are not men who suddenly found more motivation, or whose wives had some kind of breakthrough, or who stumbled into the perfectly right conversation. They are men who got honest about what they actually wanted and decided to stop waiting for the situation to improve on its own. The work I do with men is about exactly this. Not fixing your partner. We can't do that. Not relegating it to the past, but getting clear about what is actually happening between you two, what you have both been doing to maintain the distance, even without meaning to, and what would need to change for the next chapter to feel genuinely different. That clarity changes things. It changes how you show up. And when you show up differently, consistently, the relationship changes too. Not overnight, but in ways that are real. If you want that kind of support, a relationship clarity call is where we start. It is a real conversation about your specific situation, what you are experiencing, what she seems to be experiencing, and what you would need to do differently for things to actually move. No vague advice. No homework until you forget it in a week. Just clarity and a path forward that's specific to you. You can book that call at elisastoddard.com. The next episode in this series takes on one of the most disorienting things a wife can say to her husband and what it actually means when she says it. That is episode 57. You do not have to figure this out alone. Take care. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here. If something in this episode hit home, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps more men find the support they need. And if you are ready to get help or take the next step, you'll find the link to book a free call in the show notes. I'll see you next time.